Hello, everyone, and welcome to the March edition of Techspert Talks. I'm Troy Rainey, and I'll be your host for today's session. Today's Techspert Talk session is Understanding Set Analysis with our own Ola Roxendal. Ola, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you. I work here at Qlik as a technical learning content developer. I primarily focus on creating learning material for internal employees, partners, and customers. I've been here a little bit more than 7 years, and before I worked as a technical trainer as well.
Great, thanks. Well, today we're going to be talking about how set analysis works. Ola's going to talk us through all the details of that. We're going to go through the difference between possible and excluded selections, and eventually we'll get into using some advanced expressions. But before we get too deep, Ola, for those of us who are kind of new to this, what is set analysis and how does it work?
Well, set analysis is defining a set of data values that's different from the normal set defined by the current state of selections.
Can you tell us a little bit about this app you prepared for us?
Yeah, so set analysis is a tool that we can use to manipulate the associative engine. That's how the data is connected in the data model in Qlik.
Right, so normally a QlikSense app uses all the data and finds associations and connections within it, and it looks like you set this up to see the data with and without set analysis.
Yeah, so if we look at the left side of the screen, we have an example of a dashboard, and we're looking at the entire aggregated data set there. So the total sales for all years, all products, all customers, and then we're looking at the sales trend for all our regions.
Yeah, that's a beautiful example. That sales trend chart at the bottom, it's very Qlik, getting to analyze all your data and apply selections to drill deeper.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it still works. So you can make a selection within a chart and it'll show the aggregate for that specific selection. So if I select Spain, for example, you'll see the sales, the number of orders, and the average margin for Spain. And that's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah, can you explain what CYTD means and what the visualizations on the right are doing?
The CYTD usually stands for current year today.
Okay.
That means the data from the 1st of January to today's date. We're using set analysis to kind of control what we're looking at. So on the top, we'll see the sales for the specific period. And then here on the bottom, we're comparing just 2 of the regions.
Okay, so set analysis is locking some selections into those objects or limiting them to a smaller subset of the data.
Yeah, that's a great explanation.
All right. So how do you actually create objects that use set analysis like these?
Yeah, so when we're talking about set analysis syntax, you're looking for the curly brackets. If you can see the curly brackets, you know it'll be a set analysis syntax.
That's a nice thing to be aware of. If you see the curly brackets, it is set analysis. All right.
Yes. We tend to break it down into different parts. The first thing we see inside of the set analysis, the so-called identifier. And the identifier tells our set analysis how to react to selections.
Okay.
The most commonly used identifiers is either the $ or the 1. And they're kind of opposites in the way that they react. So what the $ allows us to do is that it allows us to interact with dimensions inside of our application, and the 1 turns off the possibility to interact with dimensions inside of our data sets.
Okay, the $ allows selections to apply to the object, and the 1 disables current selections for the object.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through these examples?
On the right side here, we use no identifiers, no set analysis, just the some sales.
Okay.
And then here on the bottom left, we have the $ as the identifier. And in the middle, we have the 1. So I'm going to go in and select Japan as a region. And as you see, the $ reacts to the selections that I make. And the 1 here is still showing me the aggregated sales for the entire data set.
Okay, so that 1 in the middle is ignoring the current selections and continuing to calculate against the entire data model.
Yeah, it's kind of like using an on and off button.
Right. And the bookmark object you got there, that's another example?
Yeah, exactly. There are other identifiers as well. I've listed 4 of them here, but bookmark selection is using a bookmark. I've saved a bookmark where I've selected the year 2023. And what that means is the identifier pre-selects 2023 and then the equivalent of a 1 connected to it. So it doesn't react to any of the other selections that I make. Selecting 2023, and you'll see sales for 2023 are 42.75. And that's the
Nice.
same as the bookmark is showing.
Okay, so this is kind of the first step of set analysis. What's next?
Yeah, so what we're going to look closer at now is the modifier. The modifier is a field name inside of two angular brackets after the identifier and then values connected to that dimension.
Okay.
These values are typed out a little bit depending on what data type it is. If it's just numbers, you can just type them. If it's text inside of single quotation marks, and if it's search-based queries, you want to have them inside double quotation marks, and search values are, for example, star or less
Hmm.
than, larger than.
Okay, can you walk us through these
Yeah,
examples?
we have sum of sales and then a curly bracket, and then inside of that, I place the modifier. Now, as you see, I don't have an identifier there. It'll still work. If I'm not placed anything there, it's the equivalent of having a dollar sign. And what was the dollar sign, Troy?
Yeah. Thanks for putting me on the spot. The dollar sign was current selections.
Yes, but what the modifier does is that it goes in and locks the year dimension for us. So I'll start by selecting the Nordics this time. And as you see, it's updated, but it's
Hmm.
just showing us the sales of the Nordics for 2024. I'll just clear the selection here and try to select another year to 2022. Doesn't change or isn't updated with
Right.
the
Stays
selections.
the same.
And that's because we're saying that year isn't allowed to change with the selections that we make.
And can you select 2024 just so we see that it does equal what it's supposed
Yeah,
to?
it shows 21.93, so that seems good.
Okay.
Another example, I need to expand this. This is an example using a search-based text field. I'm looking at all the product group that ends with goods. Star means ends with goods, so it's kind of a free text search.
Okay.
We have two products called goods, baked goods and baking goods. And if I select those,
All right. So it's locking into that field product group for anything that ends with the word goods.
yeah, if I select deli, it won't be updated.
Nice. And what's that undefined one in the corner?
What that means is that I select all the values within the field year. In this case, it's 2022, 2023, and 2024, which means that if I go and select 2023, nothing will happen. I'm still using year as a modifier. But if I
Okay.
select the Nordics, it'll update the sales for the Nordics for all my years.
Okay. So that's an easier
Um,
way of pre-selecting all years without having to write them in individually. You get all values in that
yeah.
dimension.
Yeah, exactly. And you can also formulate that what I'm doing here is that I'm taking away the option to select a year in this
Ah, yeah.
expression.
Can you add multiple modifiers, or can you show us how to edit
Yes.
some of these?
So I'm going to go in and edit my sheet, select the object, and I'm going to go into the data here and select the measure,
Okay.
press the FX button inside of the expression editor. After the modifier, add a comma, and then let's take year, enter an equal sign, open and close the curly brackets, and then inside of that, 2024.
Okay.
It's always good to look at the bottom here and see if it says okay.
And that's kind
We'll
of a
go in.
syntax check, right?
Yeah, so say for example that I forgot the last curly bracket here, it'll say error in expression. So
Nice.
we need to update the title as well. So we have sales UK 2024. Can I check if I have the right number here, Troy, in any way?
Well, I guess you could make those selections, yeah, 2024 in UK and see if it adds up. There we go.
Yeah.
So, what are some common applications or maybe complications that people run into with set analysis?
We're going to look at some examples. So when working with time dimensions, there is hierarchy between these. So a year's connected to months, that's connected to days. First off, for this specific KPI, I want my users to be able to select different regions or customers or products, but I
Hmm.
just want them to show the sales for 2024. I can go in here and select the Nordics, for example, and it'll show me the sales for Nordics 2024. The problem here is that if my users select months and days, it'll show the sales for those months and days.
I see. So, the hierarchy you mentioned between those dimensions means it's not applying set analysis like you intended. So, how can that be solved?
A solution for that would probably be to put in a 1. Nothing will happen if I select another dimension outside. So that kind of solves that problem. But we wanted our users to select region and product and so on.
Oh, right, because the one looks at the entire data set.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you got a solution there on the right?
Exactly. So the solution here is we work with hierarchical dimensions. We need to specify the dimensions that we don't want our users to interact with by using the equal sign syntax. Here we'll go in and lock the selections to year 2024, and then you're not allowed to choose a month and you're not allowed to choose a day. If I
Right.
go in and choose the UK here, for example, we'll see the sales for UK for 2024, but I can't go in and select March.
Right, like you said, it turns off the ability to make selections on those fields. It's locked into the whole year.
Yeah, and here I'm using dates as an example because that's one of the most common ones, but there are regions, countries, and cities that would be the same thing.
What are you demonstrating in those objects on the bottom?
Here I just wanted to show the difference between using the equal sign and using the free text search. Here I'm using the equal sign, which selects all the values inside of the dimension.
Okay.
And here we're using the free text search, having a star, which selects all the values.
On the surface, I would think that would return the same thing. So, what's the difference in behavior?
Yeah, we see on the left side we have 684, and on the right side we have 637. Did you have a guess on what the difference here is?
Well, it does say distinct, so that's not it. I'm guessing that maybe there's some blanks.
Exactly. Here I have a table with all the customers and all the sales reps, and then scroll all the way to the bottom. We have a couple of
Ah,
customers that do not have a sales rep connected to them. The difference is that the search value just looks for values, while the equal sign takes in account of the null values as well.
okay. So the one on the left counts those null values,
Yeah.
and the wild card is only looking for actual values. It ignores the null values. So that's a
Yeah.
difference of 47. Interesting. It's nice to know the behavior and get a better understanding of your data. How can you continue to divide the data up into different data sets?
Yeah. So the next part would be set operators. We have four set operators that we can use.
Okay.
We're taking two data sets and comparing them. So the left part contains all the sales for Nordic. The intersection has the Nordic deli sales. The side has the global deli sales. And when we do a union between these two data sets, we'll get the sum of the sales for the Nordic region and the sum of the sales for the global products. We have the Nordics, that's 10.38 million in sales. Do you have your calculator ready?
I actually do.
The global deli sales is 14.63. And if you add those together and then take away 3.6 million, you should get 21.41.
Okay. I wasn't fast enough, so I have to trust you.
Yeah, yeah. In the exclusion, we're looking at the sales for Nordics and we're taking away the global sales for deli, including the sales for Nordics.
Okay.
The intersection, we're just looking at which values are common between both of the data sets, the
The
equivalent of
3.6
select.
million. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the equivalent of selecting those two values inside of Qlik. And then the symmetric difference is the sales in Nordic, that's not deli, and the global deli sales, that's not the Nordic sales. And then we're adding those two together.
Well, that's really cool. And I appreciate going through all these basics of set analysis, especially those images there. It really clarifies how the operators work. Now we've like kind of set the stage with all the basics. How can we apply this in practice?
Yeah, so the first thing that I want to talk a little bit about is how to use set analysis together with states.
Right. I like you got them set up side by side. Can you walk us through how states work?
Yeah, so you can put different objects in your application in different states. And what happens is that when you have them in a specific state, they will only react to selections made by other objects in the same state. You can
Right.
find states under master items, alternate states. There's always going to be a default state. And then I've added a state one and state two.
Okay, so it's just like a subgroup, and you're saying only react to other objects in that same subgroup.
Yeah, it's just a label to put my different objects in.
Okay.
Select the object that you want to put in a specific state. Scroll down to the bottom and you can see that there's a title called alternate states. In this
All
case,
right.
I put mine in state one, and I can do that at the sheet level as well. I can make selections here in the objects that are put in state one. So now I'm looking at the sales in Japan for 2023. And I want to compare that with the sales in Germany for the same year.
Okay.
And that's fine.
I can see it's a little problematic because the scales are off. On the left, it's up to 1 million. On the right, it's 300,000. So, but it looks the same.
It is, with the help of set analysis, I want to be able to do more of a side-by-side comparison. And I can do that by setting the actual expression in different states. Here I've created two measurements, one for state 1 and one for state 2. To set an expression in a specific state, I'm using that state name as the identifier. We'll see how that works. I'm just going to clear my selections and take 2023 and 2024. And I want to look at the sales in Germany. So I'll select those two values in my different states.
That's nice. It seems a lot more useful to have the two states in the same chart like that. Setting different states reminds me, how can variables be used with set analysis?
Yeah, variables are part of something called dollar sign expansions. The dollar sign is a placeholder for a
Okay.
value. So we define our variables inside of the edit view. We have a variable called v dynamic year. It's always best practice to name your variables with a small v in the beginning.
Okay.
So I've hooked that up to a variable value selector, which is an object inside of our custom objects. So you'll find them here under custom objects.
Variable input. There it is.
I've defined a variable that I want to use. In this case, I'm using the dynamic year variable. I want to show them as buttons and display them as rows. And then I've also defined the different values that I want to use. It's 2022, 2023, and 2024.
That's a cool feature. So just clicking those buttons, it'll inject that value into the variable.
Exactly. It allows us to be dynamic in a different way. So what we're doing here is I've applied the one here, which means that I've turned off the possibility to select dimensions. If I go in here and select Germany, for example, nothing will happen. And also if I go in and select the year value, nothing will happen here as well.
Okay.
But if I go in here and start selecting 2023, for example, you'll see that the number is updated because now I'm changing the value of the variable inside of the modifier. We can control that by selecting 2023 here. We have the sales, 2022. We'll look at the sales for 2022. So it applies the value inside of the variable in the expression.
Nice. I like that. Yeah. Well, can you talk us through what you have down there at the bottom?
Yeah. So in the bottom, I'm using max year inside of my modifier. Max takes the highest value. Our max year is 2024.
Okay.
And it'll apply that expression inside of my modifier. If I select 2023, the max value in year will be 2023. If I select 2022 and 2023, it'll still show me the sales for 2023 because it's still the max selection.
Okay. So whatever
So
the highest value is inside that selection for that field is the one that will show.
yeah,
What's the difference between the one on the left and the one on the right?
the difference here is just that I have the dollar sign and the one to show that
All right. So
here
instead
I
of an
can
entire
select.
data set, it'll actually apply to current selections.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. I wasn't that familiar with Mac, so I appreciate getting to see the use of that. Could you explain the difference between total and all and show how they work?
Yeah, we're going to look at set analysis and qualifiers as well.
Okay.
Talking about, as you say, total and all, and also the use of the identifier one. It turns off the possibility for us to select other dimensions within a visualization inside a
Hmm.
Qlik. But what it does take in account is the aggregation within that visualization. So if we look at our bar chart here on the bottom, one sales does take in account for year.
Okay, so because this chart does have the dimension year, it is applying year to it.
Yes, then the measure on the far left is just the normal sum sales without anything applied. And
Okay.
then we have the one which takes in account, in this case, year. So we're still aggregating on year, but we're turning off the possibility to change other values inside of the visualization. And then we have total and all, and they disregard the dimensions inside of the visualization. So it's still looking at the entire data set. So
All
here
right.
we'll see the aggregated sales for all years. And then the
Okay.
difference between total and all is that total allows us to change the dimension. So if I select Japan here, the total sales are affected, but all still shows the entire data set.
Ah, the all will ignore selections.
Yeah, Just to kind of break it down, the sum sales expression is showing us the sales for 2022 in Japan. Identifier 1 is showing the total sales for 2022 and
For all
disregarding the
regions.
selection,
Yeah.
yeah, for all regions. The total sales is showing the sales for Japan, but disregarding the year. And then
Okay.
all sales is showing us the sales for all regions and all years.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost, but I appreciate you walking us through, clarifying that. I think I'm with you so far. So we've gone through all the basics, identifiers, operators, modifiers, qualifiers. Is it time to work through some more advanced expressions?
Yes. So we'll move on and look at the possible and excluded. These are often called P and E. The syntax within the set analysis allows us to make a selection. In this example that I'm using, we're looking at our sum sales. And as the modifier, we're saying that the customers that have purchased the product group deli, that's the sales that we're looking to summarize.
Okay.
On the excluded part, we're looking to summarize the sales for the customers that have not purchased deli products.
Interesting.
And here on the right, I have all the customers, but in this case, I've colored them by if they have purchased or if they haven't purchased deli as a product.
Right. So the purple is those who have purchased
Yeah.
deli products, and the bluer color is those who have not, the excluded deli.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like you've demonstrated all those different building blocks of set analysis, and they can, of course, be combined in different ways. Could you walk us through the Aggr expression and how that works? I know a lot of customers are always searching on that.
Yeah, we'll do that. The Aggr syntax allows us to aggregate values in real time in the associative engine. And the aggregating syntax works with putting up an expression and then setting a dimension. I'm creating a customer classification or customer type where we look
Okay.
at how much our customers spend on an average order. If they spend over a certain amount, we'll call them platinum customers. Otherwise, they'll be gold customers or silver customers.
Okay.
Now, this aggregation could be created in the script, but in that case, it won't be dynamic. What I want to do here is analyze years, regions, and see if my customer types change depending on those dimensions. If I go in and choose 2024, for example, it'll recalculate those values. You can also go in and look at different regions. So if we look at Germany 2024, for example, we'll see that we have no gold customers there. And here on the right, I've applied the same Aggr syntax, but I'm also coloring the values based off of that as well.
Yeah, the colors really clarify for the user that designation. Do you have another example of how the Aggr can be used with set analysis?
Yeah, what I want to do here is show my sales per year, and then I want to have a trend line for the average sales.
Okay.
First off, go into the object where I want to create the trend line, go on to add-ons, reference lines, and we'll put in our average sales there as a reference line. And the reference line expression is equal to average sales.
Okay. On the surface, that sounds like it would work.
That sounds like it would work, but just looking at it, we'll see that there's something wrong with this trend line. It's looking at all the single sales that we made and then just
Uh-huh.
taking the average of that.
So how would we solve it?
So to solve that, we'll create an expression where we apply an aggregation. We start with the average on the outside of the expression. And so
Okay.
we're taking our aggregation sum sales per year and then taking the average value on that.
That seems to solve the problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any problems with that?
Yes, there is. So if I select 2024, it
Hmm.
updates and just shows the sales for 2024.
I see. So you need the trend line to use set analysis so that it will ignore selections against year.
Yeah, if we want to prevent the current selection to apply to it, we need to define the year modifier inside of both of the expressions. We're both taking away the possibility to select year within the aggregation and inside of the average as well. So if we select 2023, the average sales still shows the aggregated average sales per year.
Yeah, so it keeps the trend line the same, irrelevant of selections.
Yeah, recently, we've updated parts of set analysis in a more effective way. We can take the entire set analysis and place it outside of the expression. Here, I've taken the modifier in this case, and I've placed it outside of both the average and the aggregated syntax. And if I go in here and select 2023 now, it works in the same way as it does up here.
Okay, so placing the set analysis modifier first will apply it to the entire expression. That certainly simplifies the code.
Yeah.
All right, well, now it's time for Q&A. Please submit your questions to the Q&A panel on the left-hand side of your On24 console. All right, we've got some questions that have already come in. I'll just take them from the top. First question: has the application or use of set analysis changed in Qlik Cloud?
Well, no, not really in Qlik Cloud. We are continuously improving our product and its interface. And some of the latest innovations in set analysis is, for example, putting the syntax outside of the expression, like I just showed.
Right.
So it affects the entire expression. But we try to implement this in all our products, including cloud. So nothing particular jumps to mind there. One thing that I haven't shown that inside of the edit expression value, there is a set expression syntax
Hmm.
to kind of help you build your expression. For example, use your bookmark here and you can apply that and insert that. It'll generate the syntax for me. The same thing goes if I have any current selections. And that would be something that we've applied in Qlik Cloud.
Well, that's kind of a cool little feature to help people build their expressions. I appreciate you highlighting that. Next question: does Gen AI create set analysis expression using Co-pilot or LLM?
Yes, I've played around a little bit with Copilot and it's good on doing basic syntax. For example, help me build a KPI where I limit the selections to the latest year, or I want to have just these two regions in my bar chart. But it does struggle with more advanced syntax like the possible and excluded.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'm not too familiar with those. Are those tools to help people build expressions?
It's like ChatGPT. That's LLM. ChatGPT is LLM, and Copilot is more geared or focused towards code and coding, not like specific, but
Yeah.
general coding. Yeah.
All right. Well, it's good to be aware of. And there's always new tools out there to help people because if you're not a coder, it's not always simple, but you've already gone through a lot with us today. So it's nice to know what's out there as well. Okay. Next question. Moving on. What are some common errors with set analysis?
So outside of syntax errors like forgetting the curly brackets or putting an angular bracket in the wrong place, I would say the most common error is building an expression that doesn't really solve the problem that you're trying to.
Right. You have to be really careful about what you
Yeah.
want users to be able to select. Okay. Somebody's asking if you could show the Aggr example again. I knew that was a popular one.
Yeah. And in this case, what I want to do is that I want to show how many products a specific customer purchased.
Okay.
So I'll go into my measures here, press the FX button and create an aggregate here, and we'll count. In this case, we want to count the distinct product types. So that's the first part of the aggregated syntax where I'm using an expression. And then
Hmm.
I have a comma sign, and then I apply the dimension on which I want to show this. In this case, I want to look at my customer. So now I've created an aggregation that counts the distinct number of products a specific customer has purchased. I'll apply that, and we need to have a dimension to show that as well. I've created a simple aggregation that shows how many products a specific customer has purchased.
Very cool. All right. Next question: how to handle search expressions in set analysis when the field is a dual, for example, dates.
Yeah, so the simple answer there is to format the dates inside of the expression that you're using to avoid searching in a dual field. So you would
Hmm.
probably take away either the number or the text value and define them either as a text or as a number instead of having the dual types there. And
Right.
there is actually a great post on Qlik community called Dates and Set Analysis. Henrik Kronström in this case covers how to think when you have dual fields.
Great. And I'll be sure to include that link. I appreciate you showing that. Cool. Next question: tips and tricks about using set analysis for selections in Bookmark and graphic interface.
Yes. So I'll show you how to grab selections from a bookmark. For example, say that we want to create a set expression where we look at the sales for the Nordics in 2024.
Hmm.
I'll go in and select those as my dimensions. You'll see my current selections up here. Go up to bookmarks and create a new bookmark. And we'll call this Sales Nordics 2024. I now have the Sales in Nordics 2024. And here on the bottom part, you'll see that I have expression right now. It's on the default state, and I can copy that. And I now have the set expression. And go in here on my no identifiers version, and I'll go in and edit my sheet, open the expression window, and here I'll just paste the values, and we now have a set analysis based off of the bookmark selection that I made. We should have the sales for Nordics in 2024, and it still shows me 1.79 million.
Great tip. Next question. How can you create a formula to a chart so that it uses only data from the last 24 hours?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it needs to be addressed from the script in this case, because we need to have some kind of field inside of the script where we can see when the data is loaded, or if we have a reload schedule where we place a flag for all the new data that's loaded since the last reload.
Hmm.
And when we have that information, we can use that inside of set expression. So in this case, we'd go, there are multiple ways of solving this in the script, but hopefully there'll be some kind of date timestamp connected to the field. And then we just go in and create some logic in the script that puts a flag field. Flag fields are commonly used with set expressions. It's a 0 or a 1 for the
Hmm.
data that we want to flag up in the data models. We'd flag up everything that's loaded last 24 hours with a 1, and then we'd use that inside of an expression.
Well, that's a good tip. Next question. Can you explain how to get a chart to only show the most recent sales from the current quarter? So similar concept, but
Yeah. Yeah, similar concept, and it kind of you solve it in a similar way as well. It's using what we would call a master calendar or some kind of date field. So I'll start by just writing some sales so we get the expression in there and then move the cursor to be just before the sales. I'll open and close a curly bracket, and then I will open the angular bracket to be able to use a specific field. In this
okay.
case, if I'm a little bit unsure with the naming of my fields, I can go up here and select my dates table, and I can look at the fields that I have here. So right now I have a current year today flag, so I'll start with that current year today flag, and it's flagged up all the dates that are within this year in the data model. So in this case, I want to look at the numbers for this year. So I'll add where the current year today flag equals 1. And then I can use the quarter here as well. And here I can define which quarter I'm looking for. Now the quarter is a text field, so I'll put that inside of single quotation marks. And let's just go for Q1. And this should show the sales for Q1 in this current year today. So
Awesome. All right. Next question. I would like to set up alternate states of dates where one state defaults to the previous 30 days until the user selects a different date range. Any help on how to set up a specific default?
alternate states, they contain no logic. It's more like a label that you can put on objects in your application to
Right.
prevent them from reacting to selections in other states. With that said, there are two ways that you could solve the problem with selecting the previous 30 days.
Hmm.
One is to create flags in the script that define the last 30 days.
Yeah, kind of like you
When you,
showed with current
yeah,
year and stuff.
yeah, exactly. So when I reload, I could have today minus 30 or something like that, and it'll flag everything that's 30 days old, and then I could use those flags. It becomes static in the way that it'll always be those last 30 days, so I can't select another date and then look at 30 days outside of that. If I want to have the more dynamic solution, I would create an expression with something called rolling dates, where we create a set expression that calculates the last 30 days dynamically from a selected date instead. So you could do that.
Good place to start. Calculate the 30 days dynamically from a selected date. Let's move on to the next question. I like the buttons allowing the users to switch between dates. Is there a calendar picking tool that would allow for more precise selections by the user?
Yes, there is. It's one of these objects that are located under custom objects. So I can go here under custom objects, and there's something called the date picker.
Ah,
Now, custom objects are created by us, but they're extensions, so they're not part of the charts. So they might not have all the styling options and
okay.
functionality that they have. The date picker itself, what I need to do there is I need to select a date value. So in this case, I'll take my date field. Then I can select a range of dates
Oh,
from
perfect.
this date field.
So I hadn't actually seen that, so that's pretty cool. Thank you for highlighting that. Okay, the last question we have time for today. Where can I find more information about the syntax in set analysis?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I've tried to put up my favorite resources when I tend to want to know more about set analysis. And
Hmm.
there's primarily three platforms where we could do that. And I hope you'll put the links in the show notes as well.
Definitely will.
Yeah, but the first place would be Qlik Help. Qlik Help is a large instruction manual which has both examples and a little theory behind set analysis. So it'll kind of walk you through the different parts that we've been talking to. If you want to learn more from like a learning and enablement perspective, I'd recommend Qlik Learning as a good platform where you can go and do some courses. I've put up when you go into Qlik Learning, you can search for set analysis, and you'll get a couple of different courses that are applied to set analysis, and you can listen to our professional trainers talk about the ins and outs of set analysis. And then
Awesome.
if you have more questions that you want to approach or read some articles, we already talked about an article, for example, you can go into Qlik Community. You can search on set analysis there as well.
Definitely.
You'll get some answers. And Qlik Community and Qlik Help, for that matter, often end up very high on your search engine if you go out and search questions on set analysis as well. So it'll kind of be redirected there.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Ola. This has been really great going through all those basics of set analysis and even walking through some more advanced use of expressions and functions. I think it'll be really helpful for people setting up set analysis in their own apps.
Yeah, and I want to take the opportunity as well to thank everybody that's listening in to this call, all customers and partners, and if there are any internal employees as well, for taking the time to listen to us go through. And I also want to thank you, Troy, as well, for having me on here. If you have any further questions, please go to Qlik Community and start posting there. It's a very live and active community, and you'll often get a lot of good answers there as well. Once again, thank you very much for having me on.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And thank you especially to Ola for presenting. We appreciate getting experts like Ola to share with us. Here's our legal disclaimer. And thank you once again. Have a great rest of your day.